Hello and welcome back to Off the Record. I'm Rebecca Larson,
And I'm Amy McElroy.
and it's Sunday, so that this is time for us to have some fun today, right?
It is. Yes,
And
again.
and if you're watching, you can see this beautiful headpiece that I have on, what you might call a tiara.
Yes. So if you've missed it, this has been an ongoing discussion of whether Rebecca should wear a tiara or not. And now she has one.
Yeah, my complaint was that if you're watching too, you can see over my shoulder there's like my Claire's tiara, which is plastic and it's crap, okay? And it hurts my head because it's made for a child. And this last weekend I tell people about this all the time. It's like this consignment liquidation store where they get returns and stuff from Amazon or from Target, and then they sell them dirt cheap, right? And you can get a box, which they call like a mystery box for $10, $11. And you have no idea what's inside of this box, but it's so fun to buy one and just start digging through and see what kind of junk you're going to get. Usually it's
Does
like,
sound fun.
yeah, it is fun. It really is. And I just so happened to pull out this tiara out of that box and I squealed like a little schoolgirl because it's like metal. It's a nice one. It's not plastic. And
It was meant to be.
I'm pretty sure these are real diamonds too.
Mhm. Yes.
I mean, this thing is worth a tiny fortune, so I
So
know
did
you're I
mine.
know you're jealous, Amy, but
I
this
am. I don't have a tiara. If I move this way, though, I do have some weird halo from this spotlight that's right above my head, but
that's right.
we'll work with it.
Your setting is a little different today than it has been in the past, isn't it?
It is. I'm in London today, so
Oh,
yeah. I don't
fine.
usually have a fire door, so
What? I thought everybody did.
safety first and all that. It's my usual door.
Yeah. In your own home, you put your fire safety drill stuff on the door so you don't forget how to get out.
Yeah. If you can't see it, it just says run in big letters.
Just basic, simple. Human
Yeah.
nature. Fire, just run.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I love recording with you. We have such a good time. And we have to talk about our last episode. I always
Yes.
have to stop and think, what was our last episode?
It was if Mary the First had a son.
Oh, that's right. Okay. For some reason, I kept thinking it was the what if Henry VIII had died in 1513, but no, that was 2 weeks ago.
It was. Time flies.
It really does when you're having such a good time.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so what if Mary the First had a son? What kind of comments were you getting from this one?
So we actually got some good comments. So Laurie said she loved all the different scenarios. And the ironic thing is that after Mary died, Philip actually did marry one of Catherine de' Medici's daughters, but still didn't have a son. Laura said, interesting and entertaining as always. And this is quite interesting actually. With regards to Mary not being allowed to leave England to visit new realms, maybe there were concerns that she could be indefinitely detained.
Oh, good point.
So, yeah, very good point. And then she says, looking forward to the next adventure with the two of us.
Oh, fun.
Here we are, next adventure.
Here we are.
Um, I apologise if I say this wrong, but if I'm just reading it off the username, Iriso, maybe? Says, wonder how the son would have affected the religious debate after the years of defeat for Mary to come back, claim the throne, marry and have a son would have been taken as divine endorsement of returning to Roman Catholicism.
Mhm,
So, yeah.
definitely.
Wayne then says, I think it would have been a major issue to have established an England tied to the Habsburg Empire. English would have resisted, Empire would invade. It would have been serious. Yep.
Yeah.
I think the route England took brought about trade movement and innovation the British Empire was built on. going Habsburg would have been much different, and the Dutch would have been squashed.
Interesting.
Local Lord and Saviour makes a very good point, which I think we both missed. Don't think Ireland would have been treated as badly.
Yes, we did miss that, didn't we?
Yeah.
Mm.
So, Cherie then says, wonderful way to start her Sunday. It was like being in a room with us with a coffee. She's currently reading Women's Lives in the Tudor Era. So, thank you,
Aw.
Cherie. And although nothing against her, she is glad that Mary didn't have a son, but loves us both. So.
Well, that makes up for it then.
And then the last one isn't as positive, but I am going to mention it. So, someone has left a comment that says, usually enjoy these podcasts, but I don't see the point of this. Queen Mary never had a son. It's never going to happen. What's the point of what if? It's pointless. So, yes, you can argue it's pointless, but my view would be that we have fun and other
Yeah.
people also enjoy it. And as another side note, it actually does take us time to, pick up ideas, uh, do any research that we may need on that. So it's actually harder than you might think. So,
It is.
if it's not for you, that is fine. But, sometimes I was taught if you can't say anything nice,
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
leave that sentence there.
I feel like because I've been doing this podcast for so long and now I do 3 episodes a week, and each episode is generally very different from the other. My Tuesday episodes are interviews with historians. Thursdays used to be Dr. Emma and me, which was fun, but still historically accurate.
Mhm.
And now we do this one, which is just fun. And obviously, we still know the history, we still look at the history. But I think sometimes if people are brand new to the podcast and they just listen to, say, just this one, they might think this is all that my podcast is, but it's not. There's so much more. And that is something I've never learned how to get across to people, is
Mm,
that it's different. I want to do something for everyone, basically. I
yeah.
want to bring everyone together. So please don't judge Tudor's Dynasty and beyond based on one episode ever. Please don't
Mhm.
don't do it.
You
We were
you have a good mixture of fun and serious. And I'm not saying that serious can't be fun.
yeah,
But obviously there's factual and there's fictional. And, if you'd have asked me a year ago about alternative history, I probably would have gone, eh.
yeah,
But doing this has been so much fun. It lets us look at, what was the realm of possibilities at the time. And yes, we know it didn't happen, but it's still fun to imagine
yeah.
what if.
I
So,
used to be exactly the same as you. I would always say, I don't like to think in what ifs because it's not real. I used to say that, so I completely understand. But now that we're doing this, it's opened my eyes a lot to alternatives or what could have happened if things did turn out differently. It makes you think
we
a
get
little.
to have fun whilst we do it.
Yeah, that's right. So we picked up another idea for this
Mhm.
week, and as I always say, it always gets harder and harder to come up with these. And I look at the list to see suggestions that have come in, and I just feel like so many times either they overlap with previous episodes. There was one suggestion in there that I thought, well, this would be fun, but it would probably be like a 10-minute conversation. And that one is the what if Mary Seymour had lived? That one, I'm
Uh,
like, I don't think we could do 30 minutes on that. I don't think we could I think that would be a pretty quick one. So I love the idea, but maybe we'd have to tweak that one a little bit.
Maybe we'd have to, if we end up with a number of shorter things, that maybe we could do a combination around a theme or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe do it that way. So
Yeah.
keep the suggestions coming.
Yes, please do. And I realize we really need to do another marriage edition one and see if
Yes,
we can come up with
that
some
was fun
marriage.
too. Yes.
That was a very fun one. But today we're looking at Margaret Tudor again, the sister of Henry VIII. And what if she had no surviving children with James the Fourth?
Yes.
Uh,
It's an epic one.
It really,
Had to do some serious digging on this one because obviously Scotland is not my primary era. So if I do miss a load of things, I apologise. But
this is the thing that I enjoy about doing these episodes with you because we come up with a topic and then we both veer off and go do our own research without communicating to one another until like the morning of. And
then
then
it's
I
like,
go,
oh,
I know. And then I usually find out you went in a completely different direction than I went, which actually works out great for us because of then we can kind of cover every. So you really went the Scottish line and I kind of focused more on the English line
yeah.
again to see. So we're looking at really, let's say, James the Fourth dying, right,
Mhm.
at
Yeah.
Flodden in 1513.
Yeah.
He's dead. So Margaret is now Queen Dowager, but she has zero children. What what
So,
happens?
so um, I think for those that don't know, Margaret's marriage to James the Fourth of Scotland was part of the Treaty of Perpetual Peace. So, Henry the Seventh wanted to make peace with Scotland. It's a good move. Like, we do share a border. So the proxy marriage took place in 1502. But Margaret didn't actually leave then, so she stayed for like another year and a half, 18 months, something like that. So she didn't actually arrive in Scotland until early August 1503. Um, so, she was with James for like 10 years. Do we want to mention the kids they did have just as a very brief, or do we want to just skip to no kids?
I mean, we can. I would like to also mention that at the time that she went to Scotland, her brother Arthur had died.
Yes.
And her mother, I believe, was already gone by that time too.
Yeah. Yeah. So she when she left court, Henry the Seventh did actually travel with her as far as Collie Western, which was the property of Margaret Beaufort, her grandmother. So I think that's quite nice. And there's a story as well that she apparently shot down a deer um with her bow and arrow, which I find quite cool.
Wow.
Not that I'm a hunting person, but I just find it quite cool that a princess did that. So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
like that.
go Margaret. So,
I love that. That's a great story. We do forget that these royal princesses, they weren't raised just to do embroidery or just to pray. They were into hunting and hawking and all
yeah,
of those things as well. It was just part of their royal childhood.
yeah. So, quite interesting.
Yes.
But yes, so Margaret and James did obviously have children. Um, so only one of them survived infancy, which I'm sure you can guess who that was, but if you can't, it was James the Fifth.
Yes.
The others all died in infancy. So there was James, Duke of Rothesay. Um, there was a daughter whose name I don't know, I don't believe is recorded, or at least not that I'm aware of. Um, Arthur, who was also Duke of Rothesay, because obviously titles pass and the other one had already passed away. Another son who was born after James the Fifth, who was born prematurely. Um, and then the last one was Alexander Stewart, who was Duke of Ross. So he was born in 1514. So, um, you know, after Flodden, but sadly didn't survive infancy.
Hmm.
So there were children, but I think the first thing, if we're going to be looking at Margaret not having any children at all, I think the first thing that we need to consider is James the Fourth himself, because he did have illegitimate children.
Many, right?
Yep. And the one that stands out in this scenario is James Stewart, first Earl of Moray. So his mother was Janet Kennedy, one of James's few, many, however you want to call it, mistresses. So he was born in 1500. So, when Flodden happened, he would have only been 13, maybe 14. Um, but, that wasn't unheard of for somebody to take the throne, especially when you look at the Scottish monarchy at that time. But obviously, he was illegitimate. Um, so the chances of him being able to take it, even though when he was older, he did have quite a bit of support in the Scottish court, is highly unlikely.
Hmm.
So that's James the Fourth, which technically means there's no one else. So we have to go back to his father, James the Third.
Hmm.
So James the Third obviously had James the Fourth. He also had James, who was Duke of Ross, who died in 1504. So that's before Flodden. So we need to, take him out of the picture. And then John, Earl of Mar, who died in 1503. So again, before Flodden.
Yeah.
So that essentially means there's no one from James the Third.
Oh my gosh.
So we have to go back again to James the Second. And I actually think this is where it gets really interesting because James the Second was married to Mary of Guelders. And just as a total aside, but I think this is quite a fun fact, James the Second blew himself up by a cannon.
Oh, that's right.
If you were going to think of something about a king, I don't think I would have ever claimed that somebody blew themselves up with a cannon. But apparently he was very, very interested in not just cannons, but the way things worked. Like, he was interested in that kind of thing. And I remember watching a show ages ago. I think it was something with Dan Jones in it, one of the Castles episodes or
Okay.
something.
Yeah.
And it's mentioned in that. But yes. So there you go. If you want to look at an interesting Scottish king's death,
All
James.
the I feel like there's so many of those interesting stories in Scottish history. Like you think
Yes.
English history is crazy? Read Scottish history.
Yes. When I was talking to Stephen Verapan last week, we were talking about witches and magic and stuff, and we spoke about the guy that made himself some wings and jumped off Stirling Castle. So that was quite fun to talk about as well. But yeah, lots of interesting history in Scotland. So
Yes, I love Stephen too. He's a
yeah.
wealth of knowledge.
So back to James the Second. So
Yes.
obviously James the Third. Um, then we have Alexander, Duke of Albany. So he was born 1454, so younger brother. So his first marriage, he had a son also called Alexander,
Hmm.
who became Bishop of Moray. Now that marriage was dissolved. Um, but his second marriage, um, he married Anne de la Tour d'Auvergne. I don't know if I've pronounced that right, so apologies to anybody that can say it properly. And from that marriage, he had a son called John Stewart, who was Duke of Albany.
Oh.
And he was born 1482 and didn't die until 1536.
Oh.
So there's an option of somebody that was alive at the time of Flodden. So there's one. So we've got John Stewart, Duke of Albany.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Now, John and Anne did have three kids, but none survived childhood. Um, John was also born in France.
Hmm.
So, there's a bit of a not favoured amongst the Scottish. Obviously, there was the old alliance, and that was extremely beneficial in some cases. But ideally, even Scotland wanted somebody on the throne that was born in Scotland.
Sure. Yeah.
However, John was the heir presumptive because in Scotland at the time they had the semi-Salic law, which meant it was implemented by Robert II. it meant that the males would take precedence over females. So it wasn't complete Salic law, but it meant you had to run through the men before you could go to female.
Okay.
So we've got John, but the thing against him is that he was born in France.
Gotcha. Okay.
So then James II also had David, Earl of Moray, but he died in 1457. He was only two, so obviously no
Mm,
kids.
no.
Then John, Earl of Mar and Garioch. Uh, this one's interesting as well. So it's reported that he was arrested. Well, he was arrested. That's not reported. He was. And he was apparently in the bathtub when he died.
Hmm.
And whilst he was in the bathtub, he was being treated by bloodletting, which I'm assuming is meant to explain all the blood everywhere. And it's been suggested that his death was on the orders of his older brother, James III.
Whoa. So murdered in the bathtub.
So the two brothers, Alexander, so the one that we first spoke of, and John, apparently were both in an argument against James II. So James III, sorry. So quite interesting there. So
Yeah.
obviously he had no kids either, so he's out of the picture.
Okay.
And then there was Margaret Stewart. So Margaret Stewart died in 1500, so obviously before Flodden. But this one's also quite interesting because she was engaged to Edward of Westminster, so the son of Henry VI and Margaret of Anjou.
Oh,
Apparently, that was called off because of pressure from Edward IV. So obviously, you can understand why it's maybe we shouldn't do that because
yeah.
it'll annoy Edward. But other suggestions for her marriage that were put forward were George, Duke of Clarence, and Anthony Woodville.
Oh.
So, yeah, some interesting matches there. But what she actually decided to do was become the mistress of someone called William Crichton, who, I swear, loyalty in this family was also an enemy of her brother James III. Now, some have suggested that William Crichton um, made her his mistress as a way to get back at James III, who apparently had slept with his wife.
Oh.
Others just think it was a true love story, and they might have actually got married after William's wife died. So, yeah,
Mm.
interesting, but there was no legitimate children from that.
Wow. I feel like that's a movie in itself right there.
I know. And then the final one that we have is, and there's an option from this one as well. So Mary Countess of Arran. Um, Now she died in 1488, so obviously way before Flodden.
Yeah.
But her first marriage was to Thomas Boyd, who was the first Earl of Arran. Um, and that was actually declared void in 1473. He was attainted, blah, 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 blah,
Oh.
blah. Um, so her second marriage was James Hamilton, First Lord Hamilton. So they got married in 1474. He was almost 40 years older than her, which
Whoa.
is kind of crazy. So 1474, she was 21.
He must have had some money and power.
Marrying a 60-odd-year-old. So, that's quite a big gap. But for some reason, I'm sure it must be something to do with the first marriage being declared void and I don't know, possible dates or records not being um, sent to people as quickly as they would if you used Royal Mail. Yes, there's sarcasm there. But 2 years after their marriage, they got a papal dispensation legitimising the two kids they already had.
Oh.
So yeah, not on obviously 2 years, two kids, fine. But yes, why they sought a papal dispensation, I do not know. But they had three kids in total. So we've got Elizabeth, who married Matthew Stewart, second Earl of Lennox. They had kids of their own, including somebody called John Stewart, who became the third Earl of Lennox. And there was then James Hamilton, who was the first Earl of Arran, obviously after his father, um, who was alive 1475 to 1529, so alive during
Yeah.
Flodden. Um, Now he married Elizabeth home and had two daughters, and they divorced in 1504. So those daughters obviously come out of the picture because of the semi-Salic law. His second marriage was to a lady called Janet Bethune, who he had three children with. And one of these was James Hamilton, second Earl of Arran and Duke of Châtellerault. Don't know if I've said that right either. So he wasn't born till 1516, which is obviously 3 years after Flodden, but obviously his dad was alive. And he was actually heir presumptive and acted as regent between 1542 and 1554. So, he obviously had quite a bit of power and support to be acting as regent for, a good chunk of time.
Yeah.
And the final one, who we can disregard, was Robert. So he was born 1476, died 1543. He had at least two kids, but nothing's really known about. He seems to have wanted a very, very quiet life. So essentially, out of all of that I've just waffled on about, we've got two options. So we've got either the House of Hamilton, which means through the line of Mary, Countess of Arran, or through Alexander, Duke of Albany,
Yeah.
who are both children of James II, or the illegitimate line of James IV, who was James Stewart, Earl of Moray. So which one's your favourite?
I don't think that they would go through the illegitimate line. I think no monarchy would want to go that route because it would just be unstable.
I think illegitimate would cause chaos. I personally think, on the face of it, the most acceptable one is the descendants of Alexander, but him and his brother were not, you know, brothers that we would expect brothers to be like. So,
Yeah.
basically at war with each other in a polite way. But I think that probably would have caused a bit of upset amongst the Scottish if it had then gone his way. But then the only other option is the female line. It's like, would they have accepted that? Would they have been able to exclude Alexander on the basis that there's this other line that there really isn't that much of a problem, but it's the female line.
Yeah.
So semi-Salic law, do they have to go with Alexander? So I think there's,
Interesting.
there's two very good options.
I wonder if we should do a poll on which option people think on that one, or maybe we should wait till the end of the episode and then decide on the
Yes,
poll
yes.
because I think I'm fascinated by this because, like I said, you went in a completely different route than I did, but I'm so glad that you did because I wasn't thinking like what happens in Scotland. But I'm glad that you brought that forward because it just reminds us there's no James V. In turn, that means there's no Mary, Queen of Scots.
Hmm.
There's no James VI. I mean, that shifts a whole lot of history.
Yep.
And when I'm looking at the English side of history, which is the direction that I went, I was like, okay, so let's say we're back now and Elizabeth I dies. Now what happens? Obviously
Hmm.
James VI is not a thing. He doesn't become James I of England. So
Yep.
who would be the heir to Elizabeth? So then I started thinking about Margaret Tudor and her other marriages. And one of my favorite people from history, and I think we might have to do an episode on this one because it's like scandalous, is her daughter by her second marriage.
Yes.
She married Archibald Douglas right after Flodden in 1514,
Yeah.
the same year her sister married Louis of France.
Hmm.
And she had a daughter by him. That was really like, I don't know a whole lot about that relationship, but at the time, the real history was that she was regent to her son, James V.
Yeah.
She had married Archibald Douglas, and then at some point he became regent. So, like, they didn't think she was competent enough, so they made him regent.
James the Fourth's will basically stipulated that she could act as regent unless she remarried. So essentially, by her marrying, and I don't think she helped herself by doing it in secret, um, she lost her position as regent. So, the Scottish nobility went with James the Fourth's will, which obviously they're gonna do.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, I do feel for her because we have to wonder like why? Like why do it? Why do it in secret?
Yeah.
Um and there's obviously a number of reasons. Like was there something going on that she wanted protection? Can't blame her in that period.
Mhm.
Was it true love? Who
I
knows? But yes, you are very, very right that the offspring from that marriage is very interesting.
oh my gosh, you guys, I seriously. So, okay, so um Archibald Douglas is regent. He goes to France. He's doing some business in France, and while he's gone, um there's essentially a coup to remove him and
Mhm.
to put Margaret back as regent. This all just blows up, basically, blows up in her face. She is pregnant. She has to flee to England.
Yeah.
And she gives birth to a daughter while in England, which by chance may or may not have been on the same birthday as me. So I think that's why I feel like
Ah,
she gave birth to a daughter,
yeah.
Margaret Douglas, who
Hmm.
was born on either the 7th or the 8th of October. I'm October 8th. So I always feel like, I don't know, this connection with Margaret Douglas. But the part of this story, and I know I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit because here I'm like, okay, well, we have Margaret Tudor. She's a princess of England. She was the Queen of Scotland. She just gave birth to a daughter. I kind of compare this maybe a little bit to Catherine Parr being married to Henry VIII and then giving birth to a daughter. They kind of looked at them as a princess, right? Because they were the daughter of queens, except Catherine
Hmm.
Parr wasn't a princess by birth. So that's a little bit different. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
Um, the part that I find interesting about this, because I immediately go, okay, Margaret Douglas is a good contender for the throne of England after Elizabeth. However, and correct me if I'm wrong, the marriage between Margaret Tudor and Archibald Douglas was annulled by the Pope.
Hmm.
So, what does that mean for their daughter?
Well, but it is, you're right. And it's interesting because Margaret's own behavior kind of, you know, how to say this nicely. Henry VIII loved his niece. He did. Like he showed
Mhm.
favor to her. She was welcome at court. She was welcome at the home of her other aunt, Mary Tudor, Brandon, Henry Cavill's wife. Um, so she was living a good life,
Yeah.
but then she started misbehaving. But technically, at one point in time, she actually would have been first in line to the throne because there was no Edward the Sixth.
Mhm.
Elizabeth and Mary were both illegitimate.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it kind of leaves Margaret. Maybe not first because obviously you've got Margaret herself.
Yes.
Senior. God, too many Margarets now. But
I
Margaret
know.
Senior, um, and then Margaret, naughty Margaret. Misbehaving, Margaret.
I
So,
love her story.
yeah, I think it's fascinating, but it's one of those things that her own behavior kind of took her out of favor, although she kept somehow getting back in favor.
Yeah.
So I just imagine her being this really fun young lady because you get mad at her and then she's your friend again. So,
Yes.
she must have been fun to be around for, to keep getting back in favor. But then obviously it wasn't just her behavior that took her out of the line either. It was
What
religious
happened?
aspects as well.
Yes.
So, but then we all know that, just because a pope declares something void doesn't necessarily make it void forever. So,
That's so true. But sticking with the Margaret Douglas idea, her being a potential heir to Elizabeth, well, Margaret died in like, I don't know, 1578 or something, right? But she did have a son who was supposed to marry Mary Queen of Scots, but Mary Queen of Scots doesn't exist in this scenario, so he's still in England. And we're talking about Henry Stewart, who we know as Lord Darnley,
yeah,
or he who we shall not speak of.
yeah.
So he would be next after her as a viable option for Elizabeth. Whether or not she would consider naming him is probably another story.
Thank God, eh?
Yeah, and I think too, correct me if I'm mistaken, was Margaret Douglas and her family, they leaned more Catholic, right? And that's why
Yeah,
the marriage with Mary Queen of Scots happened. So that
yeah,
would be a problem for Elizabeth the First to name a Catholic heir. That was
yeah.
not.
Although to be fair, I imagine Henry probably would have said anything if it meant he could have the throne of England.
Yeah.
So, Henry, will you be Protestant? Yep, absolutely.
Sure will. Where's the
Yeah,
crown?
yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it right now. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
so I feel like that's where my mind went immediately was to Margaret Douglas and her line, but we also know that Henry VIII excluded them from his
mm,
will. And so
yeah.
then that leads us back again to your person, doesn't it?
Well, in a way, yeah, but obviously Henry VIII's will, we're taking it as Margaret had kids
True.
because obviously she did. If the scenario is different and she didn't have any, then does the impact of his will change? Which, yeah, you can argue it does because it'd just be Mary's line um, ahead of Margaret's. But I also still think that it leaves some aspects open. So obviously, if she's got um, kids from her second marriage, i.e., Margaret, then does that leave certain people in the running? So I don't know. We've just spoken about Henry. Um, you've also got Charles, Charles Stewart.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult situation because I think how if she's got no kids at all, then Henry's got nothing to write out of his will.
Hmm.
But that obviously changes dependent on are we excluding all kids or just kids from James the Fourth?
Yeah.
Because obviously it was two different scenarios, isn't it? Which just
Right.
just to complicate everything.
I know. I keep trying to think too, and I can't come up with an answer, to make Henry Stuart Lord Darnley um more attached. What am I trying to say? To make him a more viable candidate for the successor of Elizabeth.
Well,
Who
to
would
be
he?
fair, he would have been because
Yeah.
his mother was Margaret. Her mother was Margaret. So she was a Tudor princess.
Yeah.
Like,
But
you know, he would have been in line.
who could they have married him to make it a stronger claim? It would have had to be a Protestant, I would think. Um,
Yeah.
who, who
Um,
I have no idea who could have been a good bride for him at that point.
no, because I can't see. Well, actually, I suppose the Spanish may have made a young lady available.
Oh, a
But
Catholic again,
then,
though.
yeah, but then would they if he wasn't close enough to the throne? I suppose it depends on how they perceive his closeness to the throne,
Yeah.
because they're not going to offer up one of their most noble women, are they, to Margaret Douglas's son, essentially. Like,
Right.
yes, she's born of a Tudor princess
Yeah.
and Dowager Scottish Queen, but realistically, he is the son of the Earl of Lennox. So I can't see them offering somebody of the higher ranks of the nobility. But then I can't actually think of who he'd marry in England.
I know.
Oh, you've got his brother who did marry Elizabeth Cavendish. That is an awesome match.
That's right.
Like, obviously at the time, she wasn't she wasn't rich, but she was the stepdaughter of the Earl of Shrewsbury who married Bess of Hardwick. So we know that they were
Mhm.
absolutely minted.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
and
So
he,
I feel like before you move forward, let's just pretend that both Henry and his brother Charles are heirs to the throne.
yeah,
And Charles kills Henry. He's like, I need my brother out of the way.
I
That
didn't know whether
opened,
to be shocked or clap.
I know, well, we're just kind of keeping with the Stewart tradition in Scotland.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah.
So Henry's out of the way. Now we have Charles and his
Yeah.
wife and their line, which then leads us where?
To Arbella.
Yes.
So Arbella obviously was in the line of succession. Um, you know, now again, I wouldn't say made great choices. Um, and I actually think that she probably would have been high on Elizabeth's list if she didn't do the things that she did. Yes, she was Catholic, but I don't know if Elizabeth would have preferred a female, especially if she hadn't have married, so pretend she didn't marry,
Mhm.
single Arbella to take her throne than someone from Scotland.
Yeah.
And I
Makes more
don't really
sense.
know what the answer is because you've got to balance out like how strong in her faith was Arbella. I don't really know the answer to that. We know obviously her parents, her grandparents were Catholics. Was Arbella massively Catholic? Very strict? Oh, I don't know. Um, was she more open towards Elizabeth's form of religion? In which case, I think that would put her up to the top of the list.
Ah, I think a lot of people would be happy to hear us say that.
But obviously, she misbehaved. So,
These royal women, huh?
yeah.
I think that's why we love their stories so much because they misbehaved in a time when they shouldn't have, when they should have been behaving a certain way, and they were like, "No, I'm going to do what I want to do."
But to be fair, the person that she married, you could argue, had their own claim to the throne.
Okay, so for people who are listening who don't know, who did she marry?
So she married William Seymour, who was second Duke of Somerset. Now he was, God, the son of Edward Seymour, not the Edward Seymour, not
Yeah.
him. This was Edward Seymour, Lord Beauchamp. Um, and he was also the son of someone called Edward. That is still not the Edward Seymour.
Right.
So this one was the first Earl of Hertford, and his mother was Catherine Grey.
Hmm.
So you've got the line according to Edward the Sixth will
Yeah.
or device of succession. And you obviously have the Margaret Douglas slash Tudor line. So interestingly enough, both Arbella and William Seymour, in a way, had claims to the throne.
Yeah.
But obviously William, his grandparents' marriage was, yeah, another
Sad.
marriage behind the backs of
Yes.
royalty.
It seems like a pattern with the Seymours, considering Thomas Seymour secretly wed
Why
Catherine
are they
Parr.
called Edward?
But I have always found it so interesting that the Seymour line, which only has any hint of royal connection, was because Jane Seymour gave birth to a son who became king. They were not a royal family. They were
Mhm.
country gentry, okay?
Yeah.
So and then suddenly they're like, they're connected to royals, they're considered in lines of succession. That to me,
Yep.
that just blows my mind that that was even possible.
Hmm.
Good for them.
Yeah, can't blame them, can you?
No. But these stories don't seem to work out very well for the Seymours.
No, definitely not.
They tend to crash and burn.
Yes, especially if your name's Edward.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we know Arbella did not become queen.
Yeah.
Um, but here we are again. Like, who could it have been? We have options.
Well, I've got two
Oh,
other lines that we could possibly go down.
okay. Let me hear what you got.
Okay, so we've got, if we go down Edward the Sixth route, so device of succession,
Yeah.
Eleanor Brandon, who was the daughter of Mary Tudor and Charles Brandon slash Henry Cavill. So they had a daughter called Margaret Stanley, who was Countess of Derby. Um, and she married Henry Stanley, fourth Earl of Derby. They had children. So bear with me here. So you've got Ferdinando, which is an interesting name for Tudor England.
Yes, very.
Now, he died in 1594, so before Elizabeth,
Okay.
but he did have three daughters. And obviously, we're now talking about England in a time when we've had two queens rule in their own right.
Right. So it's not unusual.
Nope. So sorry, yeah, Ferdinando's eldest daughter was Anne, Countess of Castlehaven.
Oh.
So technically, if we went with Henry VIII's will,
Hmm.
or Edward's actually, so if you kind of, well, no, actually that doesn't work for Edward's. Henry VIII's in regards to we go down Mary's line, ignore Margaret's.
Yeah.
At the time of Elizabeth's death, Anne would have been one of those in line for the throne, definitely.
Never heard of her.
Exactly. It's interesting, isn't it? And there was two other daughters, Frances and God, can't speak, Elizabeth. So,
Oh,
Ferdinando was not short of heirs. And then there's also William Stanley, who was the sixth Earl of Derby. And he was actually alive still when Elizabeth died. So he didn't die till 1642.
Wow.
And he married Elizabeth de Vere and had kids. So he had at least two sons. One would become seventh Earl of Derby and another boy, and then a girl as well. But that means that if that had gone that way, we could have had William and then James and then so on.
Wow.
So there is the Eleanor Brandon line. So that's the
Yeah.
first one.
I feel like I need a family tree.
I know.
I'm trying to picture all this in my head as we go along. If
I
you're
feel like the
listening
only
and
things that I've got in my head now are Elizabeth and Edward, like just those two names.
they were all Elizabeth, Edwards, and
Yeah.
Margarets.
So apologies if I've confused everyone.
I'm I'm slightly confused, but I'm getting there. I'm coming around.
And then the second line, I went down the Yorkist line. So I
Okay.
kind of looked at Margaret Pole, her line. Now, obviously, I went through her sons. That doesn't really work. Then you come to Ursula. So Ursula Pole did die before Elizabeth. She died in 1570, but she was married to Henry Stafford, first Baron Stafford, and they did have kids. So first was Henry, who was second Baron, but he died before Elizabeth,
Mm.
no kids. Then we've got Thomas, who was executed as a rebel under Mary, so wasn't around when Elizabeth died.
Okay.
And then Edward, who was the third Baron. Now, he died the same year as Elizabeth,
Oh,
but he was married and he had sons. One was called Edward, who became the fourth Baron, and he was alive till 1625.
wow.
And he also had a son. Guess what his name was?
Edward.
Shock horror. So the son also married and had another son.
Hmm.
So you've got a line of males there. There are obviously women throughout that as well, but I know obviously when we're talking about the Tudor line, we'll always kind of veer towards the males because we know that the nobility would support it more than females. So there you go. You've got the Eleanor Brandon line, you've got the
Ah.
Ursula Pole line, you've got the Seymour line, you've got the Arbella. Quite a lot. Quite
So
a lot of options.
yeah, they weren't short of options by any means if Margaret didn't have children. I think the one thing that I really think about, and this is, this kind of is an aside from where we went with this today, but if there is no James the Fifth, there's no Mary Queen of Scots. If there's no Mary Queen of Scots, there's no James the Sixth. There's no Charles the First. There's no Charles the Second. It keeps going. It would
Yeah.
affect who is sitting on the throne today if Margaret Tudor had no children with James the
Yeah.
Fourth.
I
That's
think the interesting bit as well is it affects all of that, but the options from the Scottish bit that we did at the start, so who would become the monarch of Scotland after Flodden, so pre Elizabeth, we actually still end up with a Stewart line. So ultimately, would we have ended up with a Stewart line on the English throne, just in
right.
a different way?
Yeah.
So I think we need to do two polls. I think we need to do who's your favourite for the English throne
Okay.
based on nonsense that we've spouted today, and who's your favourite for the Scottish throne.
Oh.
So shall I do a reminder of the Scottish one?
Yeah, please. Yeah. And to be honest with you, I can only do one poll in Spotify, so I can't do two for one episode.
Oh,
But we can put this out there for anybody who's listening to
Yes.
comment.
Yes, so comments. Okay, so Scotland, are we ready? Through
Yes.
James the Second, you've got the line of Alexander, Duke of Albany, who produced John Stewart, Duke of Albany. So John Stewart, Duke of Albany, is the person that we're talking about here
Okay.
that would have took the throne at, after Flodden. So John Stewart, Duke of Albany. The other one is through the line of Mary, Countess of Arran, and through her and her second marriage, we get James Hamilton, second Earl of Arran and Duke of Châtellerault, if that's correct, who was born after Flodden, but his father was alive. So James Hamilton, Earl of Arran, at that time was alive.
Okay.
So we would have ended up with either James Hamilton or John Stewart. So take your
Okay.
pick.
All right. So that's Scotland.
That's Scotland. England. Oof.
I know. How are you even going to narrow this down to like two?
Uh, okay.
You
So
could go,
if
you
we
could be like,
go, well, if we go, Margaret had, oh no, that doesn't work.
I know this one's harder because we talked about Margaret Douglas, we talked about
Mm.
Arbella, the list goes on for the options. You just painted
If we
yourself
if
in a
we take
corner.
Margaret had no kids,
Okay.
then that's easier. But I don't think that's fair. I think we need to go if Margaret had no kids from James, because then that leaves the Arbella and that kind of stuff open. So essentially, we've got Arbella, Henry, Darnley.
He's dead. Remember, his brother murdered him.
Okay, there we go then. So I was going to say, please don't vote for him. Then we've got the Eleanor Brandon line,
Yeah.
which would end up with Anne, Countess of Castlehaven.
Yeah. So right now we're at Arbella or the Countess of Castlehaven.
Yes, I think we go
Hmm.
with those two because technically Anne would have been able to make a claim using Henry the Eighth's will.
Yeah.
Whereas the last one that was the Ursula Pole one is, you know, quite a lot diluted by that point. Not that Eleanor Brandon's isn't diluted by that point, but you
Yeah.
know what I mean. I think Ursula was probably way out the picture by that point in terms of Yorkist line. So I think Eleanor's line had, I wouldn't say stronger claim, but more recent in the minds of the nobility claim.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, that was messy.
I feel
I'm
like
confused myself.
I know. I just been sitting here like just listening intently, going, how am I going to remember all of these names? I'm
It's just Edward,
impressed.
Edward or Elizabeth. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, just pick one. Just say
Yeah,
Edward or
yeah.
the I feel like I'm always so pleasantly surprised that these episodes are as long as they are because I always think it's going to be like a 20-minute episode. I'm like, what can we talk about?
That's because you let me ramble on about lots of nonsense.
I love it though. I really do. I really like that we don't talk about what direction we're going before we start researching. I like that we each do our own thing and then we come together because you always tend to go in a completely different direction than I would have thought, which I love because then it gets me thinking differently that way. I feel like I was just solely focused on England, on the succession, on how this would leave England through history, you know. Would there be a Great Britain if this had all happened? You know, that's a question too. Would
Yeah.
there have been the Civil War? Like all of that just changes. What ifs, huh, you guys? Like
I know. So many what ifs. So many.
Yes. Well, I've enjoyed this one today. And we always have to remind people at the beginning and the end, if you have your own suggestions for what ifs, please, please feel free to share them with us. We add them to the spreadsheet. It gives us something to look at and kind
Or
of
if you've got
choose.
suggestions for the marriage edition as well.
Yes, please, because I've been kind of racking my brain. That first one came so naturally that now I'm like, well, now what do we do? Now what direction do we go with this?
Yeah. So a marriage edition would be fun.
Yeah, I would love to be able to do, even if it's next, do a marriage edition one,
Yeah.
just to change it up a little bit.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we will see next week.
Wonderful. Well, Amy McElroy, thank you so much for joining me again today. I also I want to be able to give you an opportunity. I feel like every episode to plug your work and what you're doing because you briefly mentioned earlier something else that you were doing with recording with somebody else that's not with me that I want to make sure that people are aware of and that they support you there too.
That recording was for my Substack, which is the Tudor Notebook. Um, Maybe once or twice a month, we bring somebody on live and ask them a load of questions. And last week was Stephen Verapan. And in 3 weeks, we have Rebecca coming
Oh,
to join us.
I was like, what's
So
happening?
I think it's 3 weeks, maybe three and a bit. Um,
Yeah.
so we're going to be interrogating Rebecca. So
Yes.
it's going to
I'm
be
s-
fun.
I
Not for
can
me.
I cannot wait. You guys and I'm going to say this publicly and I'll probably kick myself for saying it, but I just finished my very rough first draft of my Thomas Seymour book and I'm so excited.
Congratulations.
I'm in that giddy stage where you finish and then you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I can't believe that I just did that." And then I went and I looked at my word count and I was like, I'm going to have to beef this up a little bit." So I still have some work ahead of me. I feel like I was solely focused on not adding a lot of backstory, just trying to get the history out. Here's
Yeah.
the history. I just need to get that out. And now I have to go back and put in some fillers and
But I think as you read through it, you'll probably find natural fillers that you do want to expand on. So you'll be fine.
oh, I appreciate that coming from you because you've written several books.
Yeah.
Um, I've written zero, so I'm always so impressed with anybody who can write one book. Like, I don't know, it's a
Yeah, but
lot hard.
you have written a book now.
I've written a pamphlet right now.
Stop
Trust
being
me.
so hard on yourself.
I think I'm just very happy that I've finally reached this point after all of these years and I just had to sit down and do it, right? That's what everybody says. You just have to do it. And I made the effort and I was like for a few days sat and worked on it and I already had all the information. It was just basically putting it into the chapters and making it flow in a way readers will enjoy it. But you've done this what, five times? How many books have you written? She's
Four and
counting.
a half.
Like she's counting in her head. One, two. Is that
I'm
count?
I'm working on five now. So
Okay. Yeah. Erasmus was number four.
yeah.
Yes. And that's right. That's why you're in London right now, is because you're working on number five.
Yep, it is.
Yay, you guys. And I can't wait. I'm sure we'll be talking about that when the time comes. We've kind of already touched on the
Mhm.
topic in previous
Yeah.
episodes, but I very much look forward to that. I'm going to include links probably to Amazon just because it's easier for your books and to your
Mhm.
Substack and to my Substack because I want people to go over there too. And I do a lot of writing over there that I
I
never
do
did.
really like Substack. I think obviously we've talked about videos, but I think it gives you the opportunity. So if you're somebody that just likes to scroll, there's lots of little notes, so
Yeah.
you can just, basically like an Instagram update.
Yeah.
But if you're somebody that prefers to read like longer articles, there's that option. I absolutely love it. And I think if you're a writer, it then opened a whole world for you because you can do a short snippet of, I don't know, this is what I did today. You can
Yeah.
write a long piece
Yeah.
about Edward or Elizabeth,
Hmm.
either one, or you can do like a live video. It's fun. Lots
Yeah.
of options.
And to be honest with you, doing my Substack, so on Wednesday, I put out paid articles, which was all about my research on Thomas Seymour. And because I was doing that, that's really what motivated me to get back into finishing this book. So I was like, I'm writing all of these things to share my research, and it's only a small portion of these topics that I'm writing on. And I thought, oh my gosh, I am ready. I'm ready to start sharing this more. So, yes, Substack is great. It's a great motivator if you're a writer. Guys, check it out. See the links in the show notes. We gave you the two polls to choose from. You're going to have to answer in the comments.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll try to put it in the show notes as well so that if you go through, and I hope people read show notes. I feel like they don't, but please take a moment to go into the show notes and
I will admit I don't.
I know a lot of people don't. I wish they would because it gives you a little idea of what the episode. If you don't name the episode well, the show notes are going to tell you exactly what the episode is about in most cases.
Then it ruins the surprise.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for joining me again today. I can't wait to see you again next Sunday.
Yeah. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to Off the Record on Tudor's Dynasty and Beyond. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you're following the podcast. And if you'd like to support the work that goes into researching and creating these episodes, you can find extra content and ways to join the community through Patreon and Substack. And don't forget, you can now comment directly on episodes over on Spotify. I love reading every single one. Until next time, stay curious, and I'll see you back here for more royal drama and real history.